Okay, I'm still running Cruelty, still running attack-based, up to tier 10 maps. I've actually bought like a couple of items now. Well, a couple of them actually equipping. Um, so yeah, why does this build work when there's so many people who are having a hell of a time, it seems like, in this league? And I think a big part of that is that, well, I read the monster mods. Um, And one of the big things that changed in the monster mods compared to previous leagues is that resistances are very different. A monster will get plus resistance to one element, not to all elements, meaning splitting your damage is way better than it used to be. Like in the past, you just want to do one element, that's what you did, or unless you were running like omniscience, in which case it doesn't matter what you did. But nowadays, if you want to run one element, well, there are some common mods that are really painful. If you do multiple elements, and I'm doing fire, lightning, and cold, and my cold is damage over time, and so then those mods really hurt one of your elements, but they don't affect your whole character, right? So by diversifying, I'm much more resilient to outliers in the rare mod group, right? And yeah, by diversifying, you may find out that certain combinations of rares can still hose you over, but it has to be a specific combination of rares. Right? It has to be something that gives all res. It has to be something that gives rejuvenation. You have to have something that keeps the monster alive, something that negates my damage, and something that can get through my defenses. Right? If you get all three of those mods lined up, which can happen, you need like crystal skin and you need something that does rejuvenate, although rejuvenate's been nerfed so many times, who knows. And now you need then something on top of that that does enough damage, like probably those little pillars of lightning or whatever. If you manage to do something like that, then I'll have a very hard time, I'll probably die. But it's 3 mods that have to happen before I run into a scenario like that, because my damage is very diversified. So we have Vortex. Vortex does 16,000 damage a second. I don't have like much more multipliers or buffs that happen. Cruelty is in there, which would be like 40% more damage. I have Smite, which I, for Link, just use as an attack skill. I use Ambush combined with Static Strike. And Static Strike is just hit based. So what ends up happening is that if something is hard to hit, or something is immune to crits because Ambush Static Strike does crits, or something has resistance to cold, like I have all of these different categories, right? Because this thing hits for a bunch of cold damage, a bunch of lightning damage, and a bunch of fire damage, and a little bit of fizz. This one hits for, over here, something similar, like a bunch of fire damage, a bunch of lightning damage, a bunch of cold damage. So we have a bunch of different sources of damage. We have some crits, we have a bunch of area of effect, we have some damage over time. If something blocks, the damage over time gets through it. By diversifying like this, I don't have nearly the issues that other people seem to be having. And I think that that is something to keep in mind in this new game going forward. And we went from like the peak of power, like the characters were doing insane stuff, not like harvest level insane, but pretty insane stuff at the end of last league. And now they left all that there, and people are bitching to high hell because their build doesn't work anymore. And yes, if you invest very heavily in any one thing, then any one mob that has a rare modifier that messes with that one thing is very painful. If on the other hand you don't do that, well then that single rare modifier doesn't have the same level of impact. It's really good that all these different game mechanics are actually interactable by mobs now, because they used to not be able to, right? Lots of these things that we have now didn't exist when the first mod pool was created. Now they do. and the first mod pool just said elemental damage or chaos damage. That's how the resists work. Either you resist all elemental damage, and keep in mind that there were auras that gave like 35 resist all elements, and then you could have a modifier which gave 40% resist all elements. Right, that's 75 all elements, and that combination is probably as common as most of the common mods we have, just because the mod pool was super tiny. Right, so yeah, if you do a single element and you are doing a one button build, and it's not like Wild Strike or Elemental Hit, then you're gonna have a very hard time. But this also means that there are lots of builds that used to be kinda crappy, which are now possible, like this one. Alright, so let's do a freebie. Delirium! Let's go. I love Delirium. I'm spec'd into Delirium, which doesn't help me here. Alright, so what did we just do? We have a bunch of stuff following us. Why is it still alive? Because it doesn't have to be dead yet. We'll pick up stuff later. And what we're doing is, on occasion, we ambush forward. When we ambush forward, then we static strike. We dump out vortexes, so anything that doesn't die to the static strike ends up dying to the vortexes. And one of our main defensive mechanics that we're using, oh, that's not a bad sign, is that we move fast. By moving fast, we get a little benefit. So what happens when we have effigy? Well, effigy does reflected damage, we're immune to reflect, because that was cheap. Right, so you kind of have to pick and choose your battles. I can't do that combination. And there's another one down here. Might be the same guy, who knows. Ooh, exciting. Alright. And yeah, some of these mobs are super tanky for me, mainly because I don't have the same amount of push that other people are used to, or same amount of raw damage. So some of these mobs that are named uniques, that tend to have higher base resist, they can be pretty tough for me. Let's see, we're supposed to kill the boss in here. I don't think anybody cares about the other stuff. So yeah, this is kind of the way it plays. It's pretty simple. It's you don't necessarily like explode everything all of the time. You don't have to, because well, you do enough damage. Oh, it's this guy. I remember this guy. I don't know what they're doing. What's going on? Assume that we can just kill these. And as you can see, my damage is kind of bad. We'll look at the gear in a moment. I'm sure that will explain why the damage is kind of bad. And of course, we are very limited on how we can do our scaling. And the reason for that is that we have more diversity, right? So we can't really get the same payoff out of some of these nodes. Anyway, so defensive layers. We have the agnostic, which is why we have a full mana pool most of the time. We just have an enduring mana flask. The enduring mana flask effectively helps us have decent regen. We'd like to get that to go bigger, of course. But right now, that's kind of where we're at. We're level like 86. We can't just ignore everything that's going on in the map. Like, we definitely will have stuff that stays behind and alive when you were doing things like Delirium, but we can run the Delirium pretty far until we get to the point where we need to stop it, because we're running into more modern mobs like In this particular case, what league was that? Betrayal? Yeah, Betrayal. Betrayal mobs are more modern, they have higher base stats. I wouldn't be surprised if what they're going to do is that they're going to reduce some of the base stats of Betrayal to bring them more in line with the other mobs. Maybe give things more lopsided resists. Versus, you know, let's just give them all elements resist at very high levels. Alright, let's take a quick look at what's going on. We'll do it in Hideout. Okay, what gear do we have? We have a Skills of Justice, because that seems like a very convenient item. Has an energy shield, we have the agnostic, so we don't have energy shield anyway. Has some life, has some mana, adds a bunch of fire damage, which is nice, because the weapon we're using is pretty bad. What are we looking at? We're having a tier 5 crafted and a tier 3 damage roll for elemental damage, and no attack speed or anything else on there. This definitely could be way better. We have a helmet. Helmet is pretty awesome. 111 life, pretty amazing. Bunch of int, don't need it. Bunch of evasion, actually almost no evasion, don't really need it. Chaos resistance, which is very convenient, and fire chaos, so this is like a 4 mod. Still the same amulet, because it has some lightning leech. Pretty sad amulet at this point. We found this frostbite on hit ring, which is nice. It has some dex, it has some energy shield. This ring, still the same thing, also energy shield. We have a lot of energy shield in our gear for a build that can't have energy shield. 70 life? Yeah, 70 life and a teeny bit of resist. Our gloves, accuracy, life, cold res, add some mana to that. My boots, some dex, a little bit of armor, a little bit of evasion, like very little bit of those, 30% move speed, crafted life, belt, lightning res, chaos res, crafted life, and then our chest, pretty happy with this, 99 life, 41 mana, and then good cold and lightning, and then we crafted some more fire and chaos resist on there. And this gear is in tier 10. We have a 3 prop Murderous Eye Jewel. As far as items that I bought the Skills of Justice, and I bought the Clear Mind. Yeah, this is the 3. Not a whole lot going on. We got Reflect Immune between the Pantheon and this. We have 20% reduced elemental ailment duration. We have some reduced elemental ailment duration here for freeze. So our freezes are super short. We have only 2 flasks that gain 6 charges when you're hit, and they're automated to be used when full. So that gives us a pretty decent defensive layer. We trigger these every 3rd hit. I don't quite have the flash charges gained to do it every other hit. Once I do my next lab, I should be able to do that. So this is not a great build that did fine in a tier 10 map. And it's just because my damage is split. Right? There were not like an amazing number of rares there, but there were a bunch of rares there. Some rares lasted longer, some did not. But none of these mechanics really brick my whole character, because I have enough mechanics that my character doesn't just break from one thing. So yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna go cast on crit in the near future. But this is where we're at now, and it's doing pretty good. So if you're really frustrated and your build doesn't work anymore, you know, go back to when you first started to play the game, and you try to combine different things together, and I think that skill combinations that used to be bad now are good. right? Mixing some fizz and some elemental can be good, because things that are resisting to fizz and things that are resistant to elemental are probably not the same mobs. If you're mixing some damage over time with some hit-based damage, it would be pretty good. Right? We have 5 effective elements between physical, chaos, and the 3 elements. We have damage over time. You have hit-based. Right? You can do attack-based where evasion matters, or you can just go spell-based. There's lots and lots of different ways to do damage to mobs. And most mobs have now ways to mitigate one of those. And if you only leverage one of those, then that really hurts. But, you know, if some mob now has 85 resist to your specific element, right? Really bad. But if half of your damage is one element and half of your damage is another element, well, that 85 resist only applies to one of the 2 elements, unless you get both of them combined somehow. But the odds of that combination is drastically lower than the odds of encountering one of them. And to get to 85 resist, you need some special things to happen anyway. Right? You need either high monster base resist, or you need some additional modifiers that give resist. So, yeah, play around. I think this meta is far from solved. I think build diversity is going to be great. I think that making monsters interact with all the different mechanics that players have available is a awesome step forward. And I think that, you know, I hope they don't nerf it much further, because it seems like it's been in a decent spot after the first round of nerfs, as far as I can tell. Before the first round of nerfs, it was pretty hilarious, and there were some combinations that were pretty bad. But, you know, what I'm playing, the gear isn't amazing. We are able to do tier 10s. Level 87, we don't die a whole lot. Yes, I'm playing a very defensive ascendancy. But I don't know. This seems like it's a big step forward. And I really like that people have to be less of a one-trick pony. And I understand that means that your number in POE is going to be a lot smaller. But, you know, diversification has its benefits. You're not as fragile.